Have you ever noticed how the more you grow spiritually, the less patience you have for certain conversations, the ones full of drama, gossip, complaints, or simply nothing? It's as if everything that once seemed normal now tires you out, drains you, irritates you for no reason. And maybe you've even asked yourself, could it be me who's the problem? But the truth is, no. You're just changing frequency. When the mind awakens, it begins to see what previously went unnoticed. You begin to notice the emptiness hidden behind certain words, the noise disguised as conversation, how much people talk without actually saying anything. And that's when something curious happens. What once entertained you now makes you sleepy. What once engaged you now seems too superficial. But calm down, this isn't arrogance, it's evolution. And in this video, you'll understand why spiritually elevated people simply cannot stand empty talk. You will discover what is happening energetically within you, why your mind and body react so intensely, and how this is a clear sign that you are changing your level of consciousness. Get ready, because after hearing what I'm about to tell you, you'll look at everyday conversations with different eyes, and you'll finally understand why distancing yourself from certain people and certain conversations isn't coldness. It's spiritual self-preservation. Now that you understand why your mind shuts down to idle chatter, everything starts to make sense. You're not getting colder. You're becoming more aware. And this is the kind of clarity that changes how you see the world, your relationships, and even what you accept in your life. This content helped you see what many people spend their entire lives without realizing, and that's why it needs to continue reaching more people who are awakening like you. So show that you're part of this group, like the video and subscribe to the channel now. Together, we will continue this journey of growth and awareness that is transforming the way you live and connect with the world. You know when you're in a room full of people talking, laughing and commenting on everything, and suddenly you realize that none of it holds your attention anymore. The conversations seem to revolve around the same things, the same problems, the same complaints. You listen, but it's as if you're not there. It gives you a strange, almost physical sensation, as if your energy is slowly being drained. This happens because, when you begin to awaken spiritually, your mind and heart become more attuned. Words begin to carry weight, intention, and truth, and anything that lacks these begins to deeply bother you. Before, you could spend hours talking about anything. Now, 5 minutes of idle chatter feels like an eternity. And the strangest thing is that, at first, you try to force it. You try to fit in, you try to feel the same pleasure in certain conversations again, but it doesn't work. It's like trying to laugh at a joke that's lost its charm. You realize that people talk only to fill the silence, and silence for you is no longer uncomfortable. On the contrary, silence has become a shelter. When you connect with your essence, you understand that silence isn't empty. It's presence. It's where you hear what truly matters. And that's precisely why shallow conversations start to sound so distant. They don't vibrate on the same frequency as you. Many people don't understand this and end up feeling out of place. They think they're becoming antisocial, cold, or even arrogant. But what's happening is something quite different. It's evolution. As your consciousness expands, your interests shift. You no longer seek to talk. You seek to understand. You no longer want to be right. You want peace. And this changes everything. You begin to perceive the tone of words, the energy behind intentions, and you realize that many conversations aren't exchanges. They're arguments, attempts to fill an inner void with noise. And those who have grown accustomed to listening to their own silence feel this from afar. Perhaps you've noticed that after talking to certain people, you leave feeling tired, heavy, and drained of energy. Have you noticed this? It's not an impression, it's real. The vibration of words and intentions is something the body feels. Shallow conversations, full of judgment, gossip, and complaints, drain energy. And when you're in a process of spiritual elevation, this becomes unbearable. Your body rejects it. Your mind wanders and your soul begs to be let out. It's like trying to breathe fresh air in a closed room. And the worst part is that often the people around you don't understand this change. They think you're strange and distant, but you're just trying to breathe better. And here's something important. When you begin to awaken, your sensitivity increases. You begin to notice not only what people say, but what they feel as they speak. You sense when someone speaks from the heart. And when they speak, just for the sake of it, And this completely changes the way you relate. Sometimes a 2-minute conversation with someone genuine is worth more than hours with someone who just wants to be heard but doesn't want to listen. And it's at this point that you begin to value silence. Because silence between two people who understand each other is worth more than 1,000 words thrown to the wind. The truth is, most people speak out of fear of their own emptiness. They've become accustomed to using words as crutches to avoid facing silence, because silence reveals who we truly are. And when you awaken spiritually, silence no longer scares you, it heals you. Therefore, those who live in this new state of consciousness no longer feel the need to speak constantly. You begin to express yourself only when there's something real to say, something that comes from the soul. Anything without truth sounds like noise, and the more you grow spiritually, the more intolerant you become of this kind of noise. But this is where the challenge comes in, because the world is full of noise, full of voices trying to be heard, but few willing to truly listen. And inevitably, you'll feel like you're distancing yourself from many people. You'll feel like isolating yourself, being at peace, choosing better who you share your time and words with. And that's okay. This isn't loneliness, it's discernment. You're not rejecting people. You're choosing to preserve your energy. You begin to understand that being with someone doesn't necessarily mean being connected. And this realization changes everything. Maybe now you're thinking of someone who always strikes up a conversation but never listens, or of situations where you try to bring up something deeper and the person changes the subject, makes a joke or ignores you completely. It's frustrating, right? And that's where clarity comes. You're not wrong for feeling disconnected. It's just a sign that your soul is tired of superficiality, that you want more truth, more purpose, more connection. And that's why empty conversations become unbearable. They no longer nourish you. They no longer serve who you're becoming. Now tell me something. Have you been feeling this way too? Have you noticed that certain conversations seem to leave you exhausted, while others completely renew you? Write the word here in the comments, conscience, so I know you're in this phase too. It's a way of showing that you're awake and that you're part of this group that's no longer content with the superficial. And as you understand all this, something else begins to happen. Something that changes not only the way you speak, but also the way you listen. You begin to realize that there's something much deeper going on behind the words, a kind of invisible exchange, a silent vibration that says much more than any speech. And that's when everything begins to transform. When you begin to awaken spiritually, you realize that not every conversation is on the same level. There are conversations that uplift and others that drain. And this isn't about arrogance or superiority. It's about frequency. People live at different stages of consciousness, and each stage emits a different type of energy. Those who vibrate higher feel when the environment or conversation is shallow, artificial, and purposeless. It's like trying to tune into a high-frequency radio, but someone insists on turning the knob to a noisy station. The sound doesn't fit, it irritates, it destabilizes. You try to listen, but you can't stand it for long. Over time, you begin to realize that depth and superficiality don't mix. As you grow spiritually, you begin to seek meaning in everything, in words, actions, and exchanges. And when something comes loaded with vanity, gossip, or a repetition of problems, your body feels it before your mind. It's like a kind of energetic rejection. You feel disconnected, tired, as if you're being forced to remain in a place where the air is too heavy. And then that thought arises, am I getting impatient? No, you're just vibrating differently. Those who awaken understand that the value of a conversation lies in the energy it carries. Sometimes, a simple look filled with truth is worth more than 1,000 soulless words. But the modern world has accustomed people to speaking for the sake of speaking, not for the sake of communicating. Many speak to appear interesting, to be heard, or to escape themselves. But for those who vibrate higher, this becomes noise. You begin to realize how rare it is for someone to speak from the heart, how rare it is to hear a word that truly touches you. That's why, when you meet someone who speaks from the heart, it's like finding clean water in the middle of the desert. And this difference in frequency is what makes spiritually elevated people distance themselves from certain groups, not because they think they're better, but because they simply can't stay where the energy is shallow. It's like trying to dive into a deep ocean while others insist on playing on the beach. You don't judge, but you understand that you need something more. You need conversations that challenge you, that make you think, feel, and grow. Conversations where you can be yourself without having to feign interest in topics that no longer nourish you. And this completely changes the way you relate. You start to be more selective about who you talk to, what you talk about, and even how much you talk. Patience for idle chatter disappears, and what was once entertainment becomes exhausting. You feel like keeping quiet, not for lack of topics, but because of an overabundance of awareness. You understand that not everyone is ready for certain conversations, and that's okay. Awakening isn't about imposing your frequency, it's about preserving your peace. But it's difficult because often the people around you don't understand. They think you're distant, cold, or indifferent, when, in reality, you're just learning to protect your energy. And that takes courage. Courage to no longer fit in where you no longer belong. Courage to say no to conversations that drain you. Courage to choose silence when the world insists on talking too much. You begin to notice that the quality of your connections changes when you shift your vibration. The right people start to appear. Those who say little but speak with soul. Those who listen with their heart. Who understand your silences. Who don't compete to see who has the best story, but share their own vulnerability with truth. These are the connections that nourish. And once you experience the flavor of a conversation like this, everything superficial loses its meaning. Maybe you felt this recently. That discomfort in conversations that once seemed fun. That feeling of being out of place when everyone talks about things that no longer interest you. If this has been happening, it's because your frequency has shifted. And shifting your frequency is a sign of growth, not withdrawal. It's the universe preparing you to connect with people and experiences that truly align with your new vibration. By the way, I want you to tell me here in the comments, do you also feel that your energy no longer matches certain environments or people? Write the word frequency, so I know you're in this phase. It's important to see how many people are feeling the same, because it shows that consciousness is expanding collectively. And that's precisely where everything starts to get more intense. Because the more you raise your vibration, the more sensitive you become to what doesn't align with it. And this sensitivity, which once felt like a burden, will reveal itself as one of the greatest strengths of your journey. You know that moment when you're talking to someone and you feel like they're not being genuine. They smile, speak enthusiastically, but something inside you screams that it's fake. It's as if the energy doesn't match, as if the words have no soul. Those who awaken spiritually begin to perceive this with an almost uncomfortable clarity. It's as if their eyes see beyond what's visible, and no matter how hard you try to ignore it, you can't. You can sense when someone is wearing a mask, and it's exhausting. Spiritually elevated people quickly tire of conversations where no one is truly present, where every word is a disguise to hide what they're feeling. Ultimately, what's tiring isn't the conversation itself, but the effort to sustain something that isn't true. You feel the weight of the act, and the worst part is that the modern world thrives on masks. Masks of success, happiness, superiority. People talk constantly to impress, to be accepted, to appear to be something they're not. And for those who live in tune with what's real, this kind of energy is suffocating. It's like trying to breathe in a smoke-filled room. The more the other person pretends, the harder it is to stay there. And it's not about judging anyone, it's about feeling the difference between those who speak from the soul and those who speak to maintain an image. When you awaken, you begin to understand that many people talk only out of fear of silence, because silence forces you to look within. And looking within isn't always pretty. That's why people prefer to disguise themselves, laugh, change the subject. But those who have gone through this process of self-discovery know that silence isn't dangerous. It's liberating. And then, when you try to talk to someone who still lives behind their own mask, the connection simply doesn't happen. It's like trying to fit two different-shaped puzzle pieces together. You realize that most conversations aren't exchanges, they're performances. One wants to appear wise, the other wants to appear successful, and neither wants to appear vulnerable. But those who are spiritually awakened seek the opposite, authenticity. They prefer the uncomfortable. Truth to the comfortable lie. And that changes everything. You begin to value what's said from the heart, even if it's simple, even if it hurts. A sincere sentence is worth more than 1,000 false compliments. Over time, You realize it's nearly impossible to hold long conversations with someone who lives a facade. You sense the emptiness behind the words, the desperation hidden in the laughter, the insecurity disguised as arrogance, and the more sensitive you become, the quicker you recognize this. It's as if your soul begins to speak louder than your ears. You sense when someone is being genuine and when they're just acting. And that's why spiritually elevated people prefer silence to the wrong company. But this mask fatigue also has a positive side. It teaches you to value people who are real. Those who aren't afraid to say, "I don't know, I made a mistake, I'm tired." People who don't pretend to be okay all the time. These people become gold for those who live authentically. Because with them, you can be yourself. You can speak without editing, you can laugh without forcing, you can cry without shame. It's this kind of connection that the awakened soul seeks, something that doesn't require effort to exist. Perhaps you've noticed yourself distancing yourself from certain groups, certain friendships, and it's not because you've become difficult. It's because your vibe is changing. You no longer have patience for conversations where everyone is trying to prove something. You want to talk about what's real, feelings, purpose, self-knowledge, transformative experiences. What's false, what's automatic, what's rehearsed, simply doesn't fit anymore. And the most interesting thing is that the more you align with the truth, the more other people's masks become evident. You see beyond the rhetoric, and what hurts most is realizing that many of the people you loved are still trapped in this game. You even try to reach out, but something inside you refuses to participate in the play. Silence becomes your best response. And this isn't contempt, it's protection, because every time you try to force a conversation with someone who isn't genuine, you disconnect from yourself. And those who have learned the value of their own peace wouldn't trade it for anything. I want to hear from you. Are you feeling tired of talking to people who always seem to be faking it? Comment here. True. So I know you understand what I'm saying. It's important to share because many people who are awakening go through this and think they're alone. But they're not. This is one of the clearest signs of spiritual growth, intolerance of falsehood. And the curious thing is, the further you step away from the masks, the more you begin to perceive something even deeper. You understand that even words have limits, that even sincere conversations can't express everything you feel. And that's when a new understanding of the power of silence emerges. Have you ever noticed how, after a certain point, words seem too small to express what you feel? It's as if they can't convey what's inside you. When your consciousness begins to expand, you understand that speaking is just an imperfect attempt to describe something much larger. And then ordinary conversations full of pre-made phrases and automatic opinions begin to lose their meaning. You no longer want to talk just for the sake of talking. You want to feel the true weight of each word. You want to say something that builds, that transforms, that brings clarity. And when that doesn't happen, the dialogue feels like a distant, empty echo. Spiritually elevated people understand that words are fleeting and that most of them are used unconsciously. They observe how much people talk about the past that's already gone or the future that doesn't even exist yet, forgetting that the only real moment is now. And so when someone awakened is in a superficial conversation, they quickly feel discomfort because they realize that it isn't presence, it's distraction. The awakened mind can't stand the noise of repetition. It wants truth, it wants connection, it wants the here and now. And this doesn't mean that those who awaken stop enjoying talking. On the contrary, when they speak with intention. Every word has a purpose, every sentence arises from an inner place of awareness. But the problem is that most people use words as a shield. They talk non-stop so they don't have to think. They talk to escape the silence, to avoid facing what they really feel. But those who awaken spiritually see this from afar. They sense when conversation is just a curtain to hide the emptiness. And then, even surrounded by people, you start to feel alone. Not because there's no one there, but because no one is truly there. Over time, you realize that the conversations that most impacted your life weren't those filled with pretty phrases. They were the simple, yet sincere ones. They were the moments when someone looked you in the eye and said something genuine, something that came from the soul. And that's why superficiality becomes so difficult to bear. A spiritually awakened person doesn't seek beautiful words, they seek true words. Beauty lies in authenticity, not appearance. And when words are used to manipulate, to control, to maintain an image, The energy simply doesn't flow. It's curious how, the more aware you are, the more you perceive the difference between what is said and what is felt. You begin to hear the tone, the pauses, the weight of the words, and all of this tells you more than the content itself. Sometimes someone talks about happiness with a tone of sadness, or talks about peace while their body shows tension. And that's when the awakened understand. Words are fragile. They are merely bridges that attempt to connect the inner world to the outer, but they almost always fail. True understanding happens on another level, in the vibration, in the energy, in what is felt and not said. Therefore, those who live consciously don't waste time discussing the ephemeral. They don't get caught up in debates that revolve around the ego. They understand that what is said is often just the reflection of minds trapped in illusions. The spiritually elevated person prefers to invest energy in conversations that add value, that bring clarity, that expand. And that's why they keep quiet when they feel they're faced with someone who's just talking for the sake of it. Because they know that wasting energy on something shallow is like trying to hold water in your hands. It always escapes. But don't think this is coldness. It's spiritual maturity. It's knowing that time is too precious to be wasted on words that don't build anything. It's realizing that there's wisdom in choosing silence instead of trying to explain the inexplicable. And when you reach this point, you begin to feel something profound. A peace that comes from not needing to have the last word, from not needing to be understood all the time. You simply know, and that's enough. Perhaps you've noticed this too, that moment when someone says something offensive to you, and instead of reacting, you just observe. Not because you agree, but because you understand that reacting would be descending to a level of consciousness that no longer belongs to you. This is a clear sign of spiritual expansion, the ability to see beyond what is said. You understand that every word carries the energy of the one who speaks it, and that not everything deserves a response. Sometimes true power lies in letting the sound die in the air. Now tell me, do you also feel like certain conversations just don't resonate with you anymore? That you prefer silence to speaking just out of politeness? Write the word here in the comments presence so I know you feel it too. It's important because this kind of awareness shows that your consciousness is shifting. And when that happens, something even more powerful begins to emerge. You begin to discover that there's a kind of communication much deeper than words. There's something curious that happens when consciousness awakens. You begin to discover that silence between two people can be more intimate than hours of conversation. Suddenly, being next to someone without having to say anything becomes one of the most authentic experiences there is. Silence stops being a void to be filled and becomes a space of true connection. It's there that you realize whether the other person's presence brings you peace or causes you discomfort. Spiritually elevated people understand this, that silence is its own language, spoken only by those who have learned to listen beyond words. At first it may seem strange. You grow up hearing that silence is a sign of coldness, disinterest, even arrogance. But when you begin to live in a deeper state of consciousness, you understand that silence doesn't separate, it unites. It's the moment when masks fall, when energy speaks louder than sound. It's in silence that you truly feel who's by your side. There are light silences that calm you, and heavy silences that suffocate you. And when you learn to recognize this difference, you understand that it's not the conversation that creates the connection, it's the shared vibration. Spiritually elevated people are not afraid of silence because they know it is not absence, it is total presence. It is being there, whole, without needing to prove anything. It is when the look says it all, when the gesture speaks louder than any rehearsed speech. It is in this silent space that the soul communicates, that the heart conveys what the mouth cannot say. Therefore, those who vibrate high don't feel the need to constantly talk. They prefer to listen, observe, feel. And often, while the world screams, the awakened simply breathe and understand what is behind the noise. And it's curious because when you start to value silence, the people around you don't always understand. They think you're distant, disconnected, but in reality you're more present than ever. You just don't want to waste energy on words that carry no purpose. You learn that presence is a form of love, that being with someone, body and soul, without distractions is worth much more than any forced conversation. This kind of presence has a rare power. It heals, soothes, reconnects. Silence is also a mirror. It shows who can be at peace with themselves and who constantly needs noise to distract themselves from their own thoughts. And this explains why, when you begin to grow spiritually, you also begin to distance yourself from people who can't stand silence. They need to talk constantly, fill the air, change the subject, laugh loudly, anything to avoid facing their inner emptiness. But those who have learned to make peace with silence find refuge in it. It's where you recharge, understand yourself, and become stronger. And perhaps the most beautiful thing of all is realizing that shared silence is a kind of mature love. It's that moment when two people are together, without the need to impress, without the need to make it work. It's when simply being there is enough. It's when the energy aligns, and the conversation stops being made of words and starts being made of presence. Few people understand this, but those who do never go back. Once you feel the power of true silence, any empty conversation sounds too loud. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever had that moment when silence with someone told you more than any conversation could? Write the word here in the comments, silence, so I know you feel it too. Because when you recognize the value of silence, you understand something profound. The right presence requires no effort, no speech, it just vibrates. And it's precisely this vibration that begins to change everything. Because the more you learn to listen to the silence, the more sensitive you become to the energy of people, places, and words. And this sensitivity, which many people mistake for weakness, will reveal a power that few have the courage to see. There comes a moment in spiritual awakening when you realize you no longer need to shout to be heard, that you no longer need to explain, convince, or justify yourself. Because when the soul speaks, the world simply falls silent. It's a different kind of silence, not that uncomfortable emptiness, but a natural respect the universe has for those who live in truth, spiritually elevated. People reach this point. They don't speak to prove anything, they speak to share. Their words don't come from the ego, they come from experience. That's why, when they say something, the energy shifts, the atmosphere changes. It's as if whatever is said is charged with an effortless force, and that's why they can't stand empty chatter. Because they've already understood the power of words. They know that every word is a seed, and that talking just for the sake of talking is wasting energy. When an awakened person speaks, they speak with intention. They speak with their soul, they speak because they know that words build realities, build bridges, and heal wounds. And that's why the noise of the world begins to bother them so much. Because the more you connect with your essence, the more you feel the difference between what's real and what's just noise. You begin to realize that many people speak to be heard, but few speak to be understood. That most conversations are just a battle of egos. Who's more right? Who knows more? Who has the last word? But when you reach this state of consciousness, these battles simply lose their meaning. You understand that each person speaks from their own level of awareness, and this brings you an incredible peace. You no longer react, you observe, you listen. And when you decide to speak, your words carry weight because they come from a place of calm, not vanity. It's at this stage that you begin to feel the power of what's spoken from the heart. A simple "I understand you" can change someone's day. An "I believe in you" can awaken forces that were dormant. Words, when they come from an awakened soul, cease to be mere sound and become vibration. And those nearby feel it. Even if they can't explain it, they feel it. And that's why the awakened don't waste words on those who aren't ready to listen. They don't speak to be admired. They speak to help those who seek, to light a light in those in the dark. But there's also a lonely side to this, because when you realize the weight of words, you start to speak less. You start to be more careful about what you say, who you say it to, and when you say it. And this makes many people think you're distant, closed off. But what really happens is that you've learned to preserve what's sacred. You've understood that not every ear is ready to hear what comes from the soul. So you choose to remain silent, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. You learn that not every truth needs to be spoken, because the right time is as important as the message. And it is at this point that something beautiful emerges, the understanding that speaking is a form of creation. When you speak consciously, you manifest. Your words cease to be answers and become declarations of reality. You speak with faith, with conviction, with truth, and the universe responds on the same frequency. This is why the awakened one doesn't speak ill of others, doesn't complain about life, doesn't waste time in pointless conversations. They understand that each word is an energetic command, and those who have discovered this tend to their own vibration like a gardener tends the earth. Now it all makes sense, doesn't it? You understand why certain conversations tire you, why silence comforts you, and why your energy seems to react differently than everyone else's. This content helped you see how real your awakening is and how it's transforming you from within. And precisely because you've felt this clarity, you can help others go through the same thing. Like this video and subscribe to the channel, because this is how this message continues to reach those who are still lost in this process and need to understand what you understood today. Write the word here in the comments, wake up, so I know you're among those who are seeing the world through different eyes. And get ready, because the next video will open your mind even further. You'll discover something that explains why, as your consciousness expands, the more the universe begins to test you in ways no one has told you before. This is just the beginning of your transformation.